months later, Nneka gave birth to a baby boy. She was happy, but not so happy, because the baby now stood as a forever reminder of the greatest mistake she made in life. But then, she had a little consolation. The boy was her spitting image, and she already knew that whenever she finalizes her plan of leaving Chima, nothing would ever remind her of him. Hi lovelies, I bring to you another interesting story of Nneka, Chima, and Chinedu, the three best friends. In the busy city of Lagos lived a young boy named Chima. Chima served Mr. Ben wholeheartedly for 8 years. Few months into his settlement, Mr. Ben came up with a story that Chima and the other boys stole his money. He said it was 10 million naira. Chima was confused and frustrated, so he traveled to the village and reported to his mother. The aged woman rallied around and got some elders consisting of Chima's uncles and 2 other relatives who followed her to see Mr. Ben. He still maintained his stand that Chima stole from him. That was how Chima was laid off with nothing, not even a kobo. He cried so much that his mother thought he would die, but he had to move on. His mother insisted they go back to the village, but he refused. He wouldn't be able to bear the pain and shame of seeing other boys doing well and flourishing. So instead of going back to the village, he stayed in Lagos and continued hustling. He had nowhere to sleep, so a kind neighbor who heard of what Mr. Ben did to him and his other boys decided to give him a room in his house to manage. He started hawking snacks and drinks to travelers on the road. It wasn't easy for him. On one of those days, while on the road, he ran into Chinedu, his mate that served with him. They got talking and Chinedu started shedding tears. "Chima, you are lucky that your mother traveled all the way from the east to Lagos to beg Mr. Ben. But my parents didn't even listen to me. My dad called me a thief even when I kept telling him I didn't know anything about the missing money. They drove me out of the house. They said I was their only hope of survival and I failed them. So my mom told me never to return if I don't make money for the family. Since then, I've been sleeping in one uncompleted building while hawking and hoping on God for a miracle." Chima felt so bad for his friend. He managed to talk to the kind neighbor and he allowed Chinedu to live with him. Together, they continued hustling to at least feed themselves. In their area was a woman, Mama Nneka, a food seller who sells food with her daughter Nneka. Nneka carries food to their customers and collects money from them. Once in a while, Chinedu and Chima goes there to eat. On one cool evening, as they were eating, they noticed that there were so much crowd waiting to be served. Nneka was running up and down and already looked tired. So Chinedu and Chima offered to help her. They helped in washing the plates and serving the customers. Mama Nneka was pleased that they could help without her asking. So she told them they could be coming every evening for dinner. Gradually, they became friends with Nneka. When Mama Nneka heard their stories and how hard they've been struggling to survive, she felt a lot of pity for them and told them they could be coming for lunch and dinner. They were 3 friends that shared a strong bond: Chima, Chinedu, and Nneka. One day, Nneka went to serve food to one of their customers, Mr. Njoko, a man with a kind and loving heart. A man who has brought, trained, and settled so many boys that served under him. Not only is Mr. Njoku a nice man, his wife too is a very beautiful and a wonderful woman. Nneka heard him complaining to the person on the other side of the call of how the present boys in his shop are so nonchalant and lazy. They keep selling goods below the cost price. He kept saying that he needed a capable hand to help him direct the boys and guide them, and wouldn't mind paying the person monthly. After the call, Nneka dropped the food and left. She later went back and humbly asked the man if he was really in need of someone to help him. Then she told him she had someone, and Mr. Njoku requested that she bring him. Nneka took Chima to Mr. Njoku's shop, and after hearing his painful story, Mr. Njoku took him and also accepted Chinedu. Mr. Njoku accepted the both of them. He wanted to keep them on salary basis, but they requested to be treated as apprentices, and they agreed they would serve him for 4 years. With time, business started moving well. Mr. Njoku saw how good they were and trusted them so much. Chinedu do not only serve in the shop, he also assists Mr. Njoku's children to do their homework at home. Mrs. Njoku was so proud of him and pleased. Chinedu is a very intelligent boy and has always had passion for education, but his parents couldn't afford to send him to school. Rather, they saw him as their escape route from poverty. Seeing how intelligent Chinedu is, Mrs. Njoku asked her husband to add him to their abroad scholarship scheme, since Chima said he wasn't interested in going to school. 4 years later, Chima gained his freedom from his master. He was richly settled and he began his own business. Chinedu was almost finishing his studies abroad. After his studies, he got a good paying job and lived a good life. Nneka lost her mother, and after her burial, she continued with her food business. Chima discussed his intentions of marrying Nneka with Chinedu. I am scared. I don't know if Nneka would like to marry me. Chima, for real? Are you being serious right now? Are you telling me now that you don't know how much that girl loves you? Nneka is one person I know that can do anything for you. You sound like you've forgotten all her sacrifices for us. Remember that we are where we are today because of Nneka. All she did for us, she did for love. Pop the question and you will be surprised at what her answer would be. During their next outing, Chima proposed to Nneka and Nneka happily accepted his proposal. He took her to his family, they welcomed her and accepted her with joy and happiness. She also took him to her family. Her uncles welcomed him and soon they were married. Nneka and Chima lived together happily. 3 months after their wedding, Nneka was in her room sleeping when she heard a knock on the door. As she opened the door, it was her in-laws, her mother-in-law, her 2 sister-in-laws and her brother-in-law. They were carrying big bags and luggages like people relocating. She was surprised to see them, but she welcomed them anyway. Nneka wondered what they came to do with all their luggages. She called her husband and he apologized for not informing her of their visit. From that day, the joy and happiness they shared in their home vanished. Nneka does nothing but cry every day with her 2 months pregnancy. Her mother-in-law would never allow her to rest. She became a maid for her in-laws in her own home. No matter how she complained, her husband would tell her that they are his family and there is nothing he can do. The always happy and cheerful Nneka became someone who would frown her face all day. The worst part was that her husband never cared. They eat and dump plates for her to wash. She cooks and they eat without remaining any for her. On one of those days, her brother-in-law brought out his clothes for her to wash. She refused and told him that the washing machine is faulty and she can't do the laundry with her hands. Her brother-in-law slapped her. When her husband came home, she reported to him. Instead of Chima to ask his brother why he hit his wife, he started shouting at Nneka that she doesn't have respect. That was why his brother slapped her. Nneka was so pained. She couldn't believe her husband would endorse his brother lifting his hands on her. But she remained calm. The next day, she went out, got some area boys and paid them. They stood by disjunction while her brother-in-law was coming home and gave him the beating of his life. That he survived that beating was just God's grace. At least that made him have a little respect for Nneka, and the area boys warned him seriously never to ever raise his hands on a woman again. Nneka approached her husband Chima to ask him about her schooling. Chima, you promised me education, love, care and protection. It's obvious I wouldn't be getting any of this, but I surely want to get an education. Chima looked at her from head to toe and said nothing. Nneka didn't know her mother-in-law was eavesdropping, and she shouted from the room, "Nneka, you lie! So your mission in my son's life is to destroy him and finish his money. What do you mean by you want to go to school? Your mates are out there looking for what to do in order to bring money home and support their husband. My own stupid daughter-in-law is here requesting to go to school. You want to go to school at this your age? Look at her in this school. Mama, Chima promised to see me through school. That was then, oh. But as far as I am alive, that would never happen. Over my dead body," she said as she beat her chest. Nneka was confused. She turned to Chima and asked him, "Chima, what wrong did I ever do to you to deserve this level of wickedness? Firstly, you brought your entire family to live with us without informing me, turning me into a maid in my own home. I no longer have privacy. Now, your mother takes every opportunity she gets to shed and talk down on me. Chima, you promised me education. And as for you, Mama, I think you should first talk to your jobless daughters and son to look for something to do and not depend on their brother before you start telling me, a pregnant woman, to get a job. And as for you saying that over your dead body will I go to school? Mama, get ready to die, because I am Nneka, and no one, not even your son, my so-called husband, can stop me from achieving my dreams." Her mother-in-law raised her hands to slap her, but Nneka held her hands and warned her seriously never to ever try it again. Mama fell down and started crying, screaming that Nneka wanted to kill her. Chima stood there and said nothing. As Nneka turned to leave, Chima told her that the last thing he would do is to pay for her education, since she wouldn't respect his family. A few months later, Nneka gave birth to a bouncing baby boy. She was happy, but not so happy, because the baby now stood as a result of the greatest mistake she had made in life. But then, she had a little consolation. The boy was her spitting image, and she already knew that whenever she finalizes her plan of leaving Chima, nothing would ever remind her of him again. Nneka was in the kitchen struggling to prepare something to eat. It's barely 2 weeks since she gave birth, and she has been the one cooking her meals. Her uncle's wife came for omugwo, but her mother-in-law and her children chased her out of the house, and as usual, wouldn't even help her. She was cooking when her husband and Chinedu walked into the house. Her baby was screaming on top of his voice, while her in-laws were in the sitting room watching a movie. None of them had ever touched that child since he was born, with the excuse that they are not her maid. Chima screamed her name and she ran out from the kitchen, sweating profusely and looking so tired. "Why is the baby crying like this? And where were you?" Chima asked her. "I was in the kitchen, trying to fix something to eat. I've not eaten anything since morning and I am so hungry." "Nneka, so you went to look for food and abandoned my child to be screaming like this?" Chinedu was shocked. "Chima, Chima, wait. So you mean to tell me that you are shouting at a new mom that went to look for food when there are 4 adults in this house with her? If they can't do a job as minor as carrying a baby, then what exactly are they doing here? Like you don't know that such screams can unalive a newborn. Isn't it better that he dies so we can have some peace in this house? Chima's younger brother said as he stood up and went to his room. Everyone was shocked at those words. Chima got himself immediately. He forgot he was at home with Chinedu. Chinedu looked at Nneka and Nneka ran and hugged him. As she did, hot tears ran down from her eyes. "I've missed you," she said. Chinedu shifted and looked at her. "Nneka, who did this to you? You look so worn out and unkempt. You look so old." Nneka cried and said, "Chinedu, marrying Chima was the biggest mistake of my life." She said it to Chima's hearing. "Nne, stop crying. Don't worry. I am here now. Please stop." Chima was so angry and ashamed of himself, so he told Chinedu to come so they could go look for something outside to eat. Chinedu asked him, "Chima, so you are not worried that your breastfeeding wife hasn't eaten anything today?" Chinedu asked Nneka to go get dressed and bring her child so they could go get something for her to eat. Immediately her mother-in-law heard that, she started screaming and shouting at Nneka not to dare leave the house. But she did. The next day, Chinedu invited Chima to lunch and had a chat with him. "Chima, my friend, so you married Nneka to serve your entire family. Where was this family of yours when we had nothing but just the 3 of us in this Lagos? Even if you are so wicked and think she doesn't deserve your kindness, can't you at least show her a little kindness because of her late mother? That woman fed and clothed us in this Lagos for almost 2 years. She never asked for anything in return. She took good care of us. Because of her kindness, we were never worried about food. How do you think she would feel seeing how cruel you've been to her only child? Chima, your siblings and wicked mother were in the house yesterday and your child was crying and none of them could carry him. Even if they choose to maltreat your wife because you allowed them to, what did that innocent child do to them that your brother had to wish him dead in your presence? Have you ever thought of what will happen if you eventually die now? Your brother is in your house, eating food prepared by your wife with your money, and still had the guts to slap your wife and give her clothes to wash for him. As if that was not enough, he wished your only child dead in your presence and you said nothing. At his age, we were hustling on the streets of Lagos under the hot sun to feed ourselves. You are alive, he's wishing your first fruit dead. My dear, if anything happens to you, that child is gone. You better reason well. You once told me that your uncle killed your late father. He is your brother, yes. Chima, don't allow that ugly history to repeat itself again in your family. Do not give your brother the opportunity to kill you so as to inherit all that belongs to you," Chinedu said as he stood up and left him to ponder on all he told him. Chima went home and he couldn't deny the fact that everything that happened the previous day had been on his mind. That scenario of him entering the house, hearing the painful sound of his son's cry while his entire family were relaxed in the sitting room watching a movie hurt him so much. Then those words from his brother pierced his heart like a two-edged sword. But he wasn't man enough and so he did nothing. Chima was already dressed to go to the shop the next morning when Nneka came out from the room, fully dressed, carrying her child and a big traveling bag. "Where are you going to?" he asked her. Nneka didn't answer him as she kept dragging the big box. Just then, Chinedu stepped into the house. My dear friend Chima, when you don't know the value of what you have, friends like myself will help you do the right thing. Nneka, please. Nneka, please, don't go. I already promised you that my family will soon leave. Nneka laughed. Your brother wished my innocent child death in your presence, and you said nothing. I think it's better I leave before he kills my child. And for the records, this same brother of yours attempted to rape me under your roof, but I never bothered to tell you because I know you wouldn't do anything about it. I know you people share a special bond, just like you have always told me. I am not ready to push myself in or to always seek for attention in my own home. As for you people, she turned to his sisters. Whenever marriage calls, be sure you would receive in a million folds what you people did to me. You will marry and never ever have peace. Chima, as for your child, whenever you are ready, we'll talk about him. Chima looked at her with so much pain on his face, while Chinedu helped her to drag her bag to his car outside. Her in-laws stood there looking at her. They never believed she could walk out of the marriage. They saw her as a poor orphan who would stay no matter the insult or treatment melted on her because she doesn't have anyone to run to. Chima screamed and cried as the words of the strange man that came to his shop a few weeks ago rang in his head. If you frustrate your wife to the point that she summons the courage and leaves your home, then you are doomed. She brought the good fortunes, and once she lives with all she came with. The strange man had warned him to be careful, to be man enough, and put his family in their rightful place, but he didn't, and now he would live with the consequences. Moral lesson: the story of Chima and Nneka serves as a reminder on the importance of treating others with dignity and compassion, regardless of our circumstances or station in life. The story also highlights on how power and wealth should never be used to belittle or mistreat others, especially those who have supported us in our times of need. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Do not forget to subscribe to this channel for more interesting stories. Bye!